Hello everybody, welcome to number 27, I'm Jack. Now a few years ago I did a video telling you all why you should buy an Aston Martin DBS V12 instead of the ubiquitous, maybe a little bit boring, Porsche 997 Turbo S. In the last couple of months though, I've driven some of the older Astons from the 80s and the 90s, and I've developed a rather strange theory about what is ailing Aston Martin today. With perfect timing, Ben got in touch with me a couple of weeks ago and offered me his very own DB9 for test with a challenge. Ben thinks that I can replace my whole fleet just with his own DB9. So my Ferrari 308, so that's beauty and incredible gear change. My Peugeot 306, that's practicality. My Lotus S1, fun, peerless handling, can all be replaced with this. Is he bonkers or does he have a point? I'm going to take it out and we'll find out if he's right, and I'm going to tell you about my own rather unusual theory about what the problem is with this and the more modern Astons. So Ben is no ordinary viewer because he has recently started his own channel, Dad Cars, in which he reviews cars from the perspective of fathers. He has 3 or 4 children, and he decided instead of getting a practical SUV to get the DB9, which is just mental. And today he's reviewing my 306. So go and have a look on his channel and see his video on that. But anyway, Ben is really quite brave in bringing out his DB9 because he knows full well from my previous videos that generally speaking, I hate flappy paddle cars. Not only that, but this is one of the sort of older examples. It's a 6-speed, it's not a dual clutch, so it's not even the best of the breed. Now, before we start examining in a little bit more detail how this compares or how this undertakes the 3 roles of my own cars, just a little bit of information on this. This is one of the later of the first series DB9s. It's what's known as a glass key car. So the first cars had the horrible Ford key. That was a big criticism, actually, believe it or not, of the early cars. This also has the sports pack, which further addresses another issue with the earlier cars, which were thought to be not quite fully sorted in the chassis department. So with the sports pack, it's different suspension settings. The springs are a whopping, I think, 60% stiffer than the standard ones. Importantly, it also has wheels that are about 1 kilogram lighter at each corner. So the double wishbone suspension of this can work properly. So let's talk a little bit about driving position and interior. I've read reviews that say that for taller drivers, I'm 6'1", 6'2", so I am a taller driver, it's quite hard to get comfortable. I haven't found that. I've found that there seems to be enough adjustment for me. Steering wheel is in the right place. Obviously you don't have a gear stick to worry about. So to me, driving position seems okay actually, not too bad. Let's just, while we're here, do a quick pull and see how the V12 goes. The answer is it goes pretty well. Although this is based humble origins really, this V12, because it's essentially just 2 Mondeo V6s lumped together, but all the same, it's a great sounding engine. It goes really well. It's quite peaky. You have to rev it all the way up past 5 to get the best of it. It's not particularly torquey low down for a 6 litre, but that works pretty well, I think, with a coupe like this. Anyway, coming back to what I was saying about, well, while we're in this corner, talk about the steering. Steering is direct, it's positive. It's been lauded as a really good system, but It's, I believe, still a hydraulic setup. It's not electric. But I'm not blown over by it, but that will come up a little bit further when I compare it to my own 3 cars. Let's, get back again to what I was saying about the interior and the ergonomics. The interior looks very nice, and it feels pretty well put together as well. So, quite a nice car, I think, to spend some time in, but ergonomics are a bit of a mess. The dials, the numbers are tiny, so you kind of struggle to see them. There's a plethora of sort of tiny little buttons here. They're not intuitive. It's hard to work out what's doing what. So it's kind of like form, I think, over function in this car. And I'm sure you could get used to it and you can live with it. But it's not really, it's not great from that point of view. So let's get to comparing it to my own cars, because that's a really good way of teasing out the various aspects of this Aston. So first of all, the Ferrari 308. What does the 308 have to offer? It offers drama, it offers beauty, and it offers a brilliant gear change. In terms of handling and so on, it's not actually that brilliant. So what this has to compete with is a sense of occasion, and definitely it does offer a sense of occasion. It's also a very beautiful car, like the 308. I mean, it's a later car. It doesn't have the delicacy of the 308 perhaps, but it is a brilliant, brilliant design. In terms of looks, in terms of sense of occasion, it's different, but it is a rival for the 308. When it comes to the gear change, I know they're totally different. I know it's a silly comparison, but I am trying to replace my whole fleet. That 308 gear change is truly, truly special. It's possibly one of the best things about the Influenzo. And this 6-speed, old-fashioned gear change is just not, it's not great. I haven't found it jerky, to be honest, but what I do find is it's quite dim-witted, it's quite slow. And funnily enough, it's changing up where I'm finding it slower sometimes than changing down. Either way, I don't like it. That's not going to be a surprise to you. It's not a surprise to me. It's not going to be a surprise to Ben either. It's not quite as special as the 308. It can't be. It's not a classic in those terms, but pretty good. We've come out fairly equal, I would say. The next comparison, which is quite interesting, is the Lotus Elise. Now, the Elise, the S1, is a car I absolutely fell in love with because of the way it drives and the way it handles. And there is absolutely no way that this, or there aren't many other cars that could stand up to scrutiny next to the Elise, the way it makes you feel, the way it handles. But having said that, this does have an ace up its sleeve. It's got that V12, and we're going to do a pull up the hill now. Just remind ourselves of how special that engine is. Criticised by Autocar, I think, if you look up the reviews, for being not that quick at 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds. Feels pretty, you know, it feels quick enough to me. It definitely is a peaky engine, but I think that just makes it more interesting. You have to rev it through, and with the way it sounds and with that smoothness, well, it's hardly a chore, is it? Sort of wafting along, maybe slightly quicker than normal, it behaves itself impeccably. The ride is, I would say, almost astounding. Body control seems pretty good. The moment that you speed up a bit, that was Ben in the 306, the moment that you speed up a bit though, you start to feel the bulk. I think these weigh about 1,800 kilos. You can really feel it. It's you can't get away from it. It's not particularly agile. The steering, which has been talked up by other road testers, It's got the right sort of speed, I think, to it, but to me, it's still not quite communicative enough. Can it stand scrutiny with the Elise? Of course it can't. That's got one of the best setups ever. But more surprisingly, it can't even stand scrutiny for me to my Peugeot 306. Now, I bore people to death with how good those cars are, but every time I come out in amazing cars and get back in that car, the steering, it's just, this is a little bit overly light for me. The weighing on the 306 is better. Having said that, it's quite happy to sort of change direction. It feels quite precise, so I wouldn't say it's a bad point. But yeah, when it comes to handling, that engine is a special thing. And it's quite a precise car, and for its bulk, it's good. I mean, it is a GT after all. The driving position to me is actually better than the 306. This is a more comfortable car. So as a daily, it's definitely a usable car. I don't think they were ever designed to just be sort of put in a garage, and Ben was quite anxious to make sure I was aware of that. He thinks these are cars that were made to be driven every day. And to be driven every day, it's a perfectly good proposition. There's a couple of things with the ergonomics, obviously, that aren't perfect. The door handles, to me, I find them quite awkward to use. I don't know if it's just me, but they're a bit of a pain to use. They look nice, but they're not great. So is it good enough to replace my whole fleet? Well, for me, it isn't in a couple of sort of crucial areas. In terms of the handling, it is too much of a GT for that. It is a usable everyday car. It doesn't quite have the space of the 306. And it doesn't feel quite as special as the 308. It looks beautiful though, and of course, if you have one car, it has to be a compromise. And in those terms, I can see where Ben is coming from. You can't afford 3 cars, you don't have a garage for the classic stuff, and you had to get one car. This isn't a bad call. One last thing that I want to talk about though, which affects this car as well, which I alluded to at the beginning of the video, is the problem that affects these modern Astons. And I think this is a prime example. This is a car which is really quite good, but it was never quite good enough to be at the top of its class. It was always a little bit overshadowed by its competitors. So it's flawed in little niggly ways. The ergonomics mainly, a few other little things. The old stuff that I've driven, like a Virage, and there's a video coming up after this, so watch that, because that kind of explains it. The Astons of the 80s and 90s were very flawed. They had big issues. The interior of that Virage, as much as I loved it, it is a real mess in terms of ergonomics, in terms of the way it's laid out. But the fact that they were so flawed allowed them to feel truly special. And I think that these modern Astons, this new generation, and the one that's come now, like the DB11, they're much more competent cars, but they also feel less different and less special. Perhaps that is just the way it is with new car legislation. And I mean, after all, Aston just wasn't making money before. But they did feel like real British special cars. The Virage is unlike anything else. These don't feel quite different enough to me. The DB11, again, was a good car, but it's not quite as multi-talented as the competition. The old cars, for their massive flaws, really did feel like a true British thing. Hand-built, you could feel it, they had soul. These ones have lots of positives, but they don't have, for me, that special Aston feeling. Feel free to disagree, I'm sure loads of you will, but tell me what you think in the comments. I mean, it is a bit of a madcap theory. What am I saying essentially? That because the old cars were worse, they're better? I hope you can understand what I'm trying to say though. They did feel special, whereas these, they don't. You know, the glass key isn't quite enough to make it feel special in the same way. Having said that, pretty good car overall. You know, it's not a car that I dislike. I think it's good. The engine is great. Ride handling compromise is pretty good day to day. So, you know, maybe Ben was right. Tell me what you think. Thank you very much. Really look forward to seeing you for the next one. If you haven't subscribed, please do, because it really helps the channel, and I look forward to seeing you soon.